Hello, and welcome to our Communication and Healing Podcast by Selah, April, and Keisha. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of overcoming it. Helen Keller.
In case study number one, Satawa decided to start a blog and podcast to tell others of how she was discriminated against by her employer for having epilepsy. Her condition causes her to have seizures and pass out when exposed to light, as this is out of her control. So since Satawa spoke out and reached many others, she has been heard and not ignored, and can smile again, knowing her illness has been exposed to help others who not only suffer from epilepsy, but those who suffer from other illnesses and were afraid to speak up. And, her story was very interesting as she was, given an internship at a large insurance company where, this was like a dream experience for her. And, she's very, very excited about the position and love to, get up and, go to work each day. But as time, passed by, she had, was given a little, position there where she was kind of like the copy machine attendant and walked around with the machine and kind of helped others out, with the job. So one day she's like actually standing there and just kind of, doing her job and, making the copies and things of that sort. And at this point, she was exposed to the lighting, which caused her to have a seizure and to fall out. So, not knowing that she had this illness, she, visited the doctor and was finally, diagnosed with epilepsy. So, since she, knew about her condition, she was a little hesitant to share it with her employer, but she went ahead and did so that they would be, well aware of what's happening and what's going on with her health. So instead of her boss, confronting her on his own, he kind of was sending his assistant to, just attend to her and advising her, hey, maybe you should take a few weeks off and things of that sort. So Satawa didn't think anything of it. She thought she was still promised her intern and everything was good. And as time progressed and she just, was being asked over and over to, take a few weeks off here and there to get some rest and things. Finally, he sent his, assistant or assistant rather, to just go ahead and finally advise her, hey, your position, you've been terminated rather. And Sata was really saddened by this as she, felt that she had been discriminated against and never thought in a million years that she'd be terminated because of her condition she had no control of. So I really found that very interesting in this case and this story. And I like how she, wasn't afraid to finally speak out or create a blog or podcast to, let others know, hey, don't be afraid to speak out and let people know, what's going on, because if you don't speak out, then you won't be heard. And because of her doing so, other people have actually come out and, kind of responded to her blog and just kind of feel the same way. So I think, in all that she really did a great job in speaking up and helping others that are afraid to speak up regarding their illnesses. And not only that, but just in the, illnesses period and also being heard in the workplace. And she wasn't afraid to do that.
Mr. Mark Lukács was faced with the daunting task of loving his wife through a mental illness diagnosis. They were married when they were very young, and she just began to experience stress. It began to become a daily thing to where she was losing sleep at night. She would distance herself from her. He was unable to connect with her as he regularly did. He would look at her and she wouldn't be the same person. And at first he was not sure what to do to help her or how to still connect with her. He would try and stay up at night and just be with her while she was going through her episodes. One day she woke up and she was having another she was having suicidal thoughts again. So he finally took her to the hospital to get her checked out. She ended up being there for 23 days. During that time, he would always go visit her. There were some days when she didn't want to see him, but he was consistent. He kept going to see her through these times, at the time when she was in the hospital. And she ended up getting out after 23 days, and he took her home. Her body wasn't the same. Her eyes didn't look the same. She didn't even look like a person to him anymore. She just wasn't herself. And through the medicine and the treatment that she was taking, she had gained a substantial amount of weight. So he went to a local gym and got them both a membership. They were in a aerobics class, and they were amongst, as he called it, a lot of older Chinese women. And he said that the instructor barely even spoke English, and they just kind of found themselves trying to keep up, or, trying to basically make the best out of what they were given with the class. He couldn't even look at his wife because he didn't want her to notice him. He didn't want her to be embarrassed. He wanted her to actually enjoy herself during the class. It took a couple months, and she finally came into her own, and they were there at the class one day, and he glanced at her in the mirror, and he noticed that, hey, she's becoming herself again. She was smiling in the mirror. He said that the class was a way for him to actually get out of having to be so serious, and he was able to be goofy and just be himself, and that was a moment of refreshment for him as well. The way he tells his story, he was very descriptive as to not leave anything out. For someone who is trying to love someone through mental illness, or love, a partner or a family member through mental illness, I feel like his story definitely gives hope, because he talked about the times when she lashed out at him, the times when he was like, well, hey, I didn't sign up for this, the times when he felt defeated. But he always talked about how he kept going through it. He was taking months at a time off of work so that he could be with her. He talked about the sacrifice, but you could just hear the joy in his voice when he looked in the mirror during that dance class and saw his wife again. And it was like he had hope again. He knew that even though I didn't sign up for this, we're going to get through it. And it was really, his story was one to spread awareness, one to give hope, and one to inspire other people who are going through similar situations.
In case number 3, a story about a mother and her 7-year-old daughter struggling to find their place. Molly Ringwald moves into a house in the best school district of Los Angeles. She listens to the concern of her friends instead of those of her 7-year-old daughter, Matilda. Her friends recommend she enlist her daughter into the new school because it just makes sense, considering Matilda was currently in a progressive Montessori school further away. Even though Matilda was clear about what she wanted and responded no to each question regarding the change of the school, her parents decided they knew what was best for Matilda, and they moved her anyways. They thought, she's gonna get over it, she'll adjust. We all do. Immediately, a week later, Matilda began rebelling against the choice they made by bullying other students in the classroom and reacting aggressively to other children when she felt humiliated or called out. One of the biggest signs to me, Matilda reflecting her parents' behavior, was when she completed a school behavior activity, stating that all she heard from the victims of her bullying was blah, blah, blah. Something the audience laughed at. But I instead recognized as a red flag that Matilda was projecting the behavior she saw from home onto the children in her class. Then, when Molly and her husband see that Matilda will not stop this behavior almost a year, they warn her that she will not make friends. Matilda responds, "I don't need friends. I don't want friends." 1 week later, Molly, a former goody two-shoes child, gets called into the principal's office, a position she's obviously never been in. At this time, Molly realizes that she was sitting next to the person she would be afraid of as a child, Matilda, a bully. Molly thought to herself, how could my daughter do this? The child who was the most sympathetic, kind little girl. So she went on to look up what other parents do to help their children. What can be done to bring her child back? The child that she knew existed deep inside. So after an animal story Molly and Matilda are listening to on the road, a story about a gorilla rescued and was now feeling grass and seeing the sky for the first time, not being in his habitat, being confused, Molly saw her child reflecting back what the gorilla was doing, feeling the bottom of the seat as if she were the gorilla touching the grass, looking up at the sky the way the story of the gorilla would say. And she cried. This story allowed Molly to see her child as the gorilla, a child not in her habitat.
In case study number 1, in a moment, we learned that Satawa suffered, and we learned that in this case, she decided to start a blog and podcast to tell others how she was discriminated against by her employer for having epilepsy, how her condition caused her to have seizures and pass out when exposed to light, since it was out of her control. She spoke out and reached many others. She had been heard, not ignored, and can smile again knowing her illness has been exposed to others who not only suffer from epilepsy, but those who suffer from illnesses and were afraid to speak up. We saw this as storytelling proving to be effective, in that Satawa was able to help herself as well as others by sharing her story and coming together to find a resolution. In case number 2, called How to Love Through Mental Illness, we saw that Mark Lukoch fell in love with his wife really young, not knowing what to expect except for the typical marriage minor issues. After suicidal thoughts, lots of stress and sleepless nights, he checked on her and realized this was a much bigger issue, something he had to prepare himself for. He loved her, he took care of her, and he trusted that she was not in a place of no hope. He was relentless and supported his wife through mental illness. He tells this story to show other people that there is life after mental illness diagnosis. And in case number 3, by Molly Ringwald, we saw that storytelling can have an effect, at least on myself. I have a daughter as well, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how I can make my daughter more comfortable in this world. Molly was an actress who acted as if she was a hero to bullies, but in fact, with her own daughter, she seemed to be ignorant to the fact that her daughter needed help. She acted as if she cared about those bullied and understood them. However, when her daughter shows signs of bullying, she still can't see the bully reflected right back to her. Molly, in a form, bullied her own daughter by asking, "Do you want to try the school out?" and then repeatedly ignoring the honest response of her daughter, "No." Then she forced her daughter to attend school anyways. That is the definition of a bully. Imposing something on someone and ignoring their plea to be left alone. Telling her daughter's story has allowed Molly to see how hard this journey can be, and how her husband and her were able to understand her daughter, but most importantly, understand themselves. On the left, you can see the different movies that Molly Ringwald was in. The very first one being 16 Candles, then The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, and Riverdale. In her story, she does bring up that the only time she's ever been in the principal's office was in the movie Pretty in Pink in 1986. So this story that is shared proves that through her storytelling, she can be effective in showing that she, as well, an actress who was a victim of bullying, can become a bully very easily. But after recognizing that everyone is different and her child, a 7-year-old, is not comfortable with going to a new school that's not her habitat, she learns she bullied her into going to a school she didn't want to go. And so the lesson we learned from all these cases was that we're all suffering in some way, and we want to be heard. Storytelling allows for that to happen. Thank you.